What's up, guys? Today I was going to show you how to upgrade the batteries, on some of these cheaper cycle lights. I actually made a mistake. I thought I was getting a deal, but turns out they don't come with batteries at all. So I just ordered a bunch of lamps, not realizing that there was no batteries included, but that's okay because I traditionally modify these cycle lights to run off of these RC car batteries. This is a Traxxas battery. This is what I actually ride with. I can get 2.5 to 3 hours out of this guy. If I know I'm going to be out for a long time, then I use the big dog, this 5,000 milliamp battery. It is, of course, quite a bit heavier, but I've never, actually, honestly, this guy's never let me down. But in a crazy situation, that's where the big 5,000 milliamp guy comes in. So they are remote control car batteries, and we are going to be doing quite a bit of modifying because it has this rounded connector on it. I'll show you guys how I modify it. Actually, I can't remember when we cut this dude off. I can't remember if the line has polarity or will determine or tell me what polarity it is or not. So let's just go ahead and find out. Oh, cool, perfect. There's actually a red and a black line inside this main wire here. So I'm just gonna grab some wire strippers really quick, and we're gonna see about opening this dude up. I'm gonna just trim on either side of that positive and negative. That way I don't grab the inside lines there. I'm gonna go back a little bit further, give myself some more working space. Well, see, I didn't want to do that. So when I stripped it that time, I pulled the sheathing off of this red line, this red lead, which means I could have fractured that negative lead as well. So I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna try one more time. I think I got it this time. Here we go. Cool. All right. So both the inner lines there are protected still. I didn't get into cutting either one of those, which is what I want. And what I'm going to do, it's really simple. I'm going to fire up my soldering iron, and we're just going to swap this round bullet connector out for one of these RC car connectors. In this case, I'm using a Traxxas connector. I'm going to link all of the equipment that I'm using in the description below, so you can see the batteries that I use, the charger, and the plugs. Anyway, grab some flux here and some solder. And I'm going to peel back this black line. There we go. Actually, I'm going to match the length. Cool. All right. So there we have it. I'm just twisting these two guys together. I've got a nice little soldering jig here too to help me out. Little bit of flux always helps the solder get flowing. Put the flux away. All right, and I'm going to tin these lines first, and I'm going to end up trimming them back because I don't need this much wire. Gross. Having to play with I'm going to twist the wire in the flux. Man, I don't know that you guys are going to be able to see that because that wire is so fine. But I'm going to go ahead and knock this out. So there we have that. And of course I'm not prepared, and I didn't have a connector ready. Great. Here's one. Okay, so I've got a connector really quick. These Traxxas connectors are awesome because I can grab a small pair of channel locks, and I just grab the brass tab there in the back of the connector, and just pop that end out, and same there. So there's my two blades, and this one had another type of RC connector, a JST on it. I'm going to desolder it really fast. Alright guys, so here's one of our Traxxas connectors, and this is one of the reasons why I like them so much. And what we're looking for is on these connectors, there it is, on these connectors there is a small line, and this solder is just to that line. That line you do not want to cross. That's really the only stipulation to making these connectors work awesome, is just don't cross that line, and the connectors are going to snap into place, and they'll also be easy to remove if you need to rework them or do something later on. So we're going to go ahead and actually first, before we attach these connectors, I'm going to add some heat shrink. Alright guys, so in the link below I've got some adhesive heat shrink. So what happens with this heat shrink is when it melts, it's also melting a layer of adhesive inside there. So it's basically going to glue itself to whatever it's shrinking. So the reason that that's good is because it's going to create a watertight seal. Not that you're going to be in so much moisture that, you know, this joint is going to have a problem, but over time the joint won't corrode. So in order to do this, I'm going to trim back the exterior sheathing more so that I'll have more room for the heat shrink, and I'm actually going to layer it. I'm going to have a larger piece over the exterior sheathing that goes to two smaller pieces that are going to go from this wire to the actual connector itself. So here is the size that we're going to use for the exterior sheathing. Of course, we're going to trim this back quite a bit, and here's the size for that smaller line. So I'm going to trim this back, and we're going to trim back those. We're going to cut that heat shrink down quite a bit as well. So here we go. Very gently trim there. This guy I'm going to leave semi-long. We're gonna say there-ish. Trim that back. Make sure you add heat shrink before you solder. Make sure you add heat shrink before you solder, or else, well, then you'll be soldering again. So here we go. I'm gonna slide this guy way back to give me enough room. These guys, we really, on this smaller piece, oh, it's not big enough. Okay, so I'm glad I checked that. So this piece of heat shrink won't actually fit over the connector. So that leaves me with going to, I've got one size bigger, and this guy just barely fits over, which is what we're looking for. So actually I take that back. I'm gonna go ahead and step it up 2 sizes. I'm gonna step it up to the same size that we just used here. However, I'm going to add a little spacer in there so that we make sure that we have a nice tight seal. So I'm going to have 2 pieces of heat shrink, and I'll show you how we're going to do this. I'm just going to cut this guy down, this guy down. We're going to discard that big piece for now. Now, here's the cool thing about these connectors. I'm going to go ahead and slide these guys over. We're going to solder to it, and then after the fact, I'm going to add this over the top here. So I'm going to solder this line to the connector, then I'm going to add a portion of heat shrink over the top after we've already shrunk down these smaller guys. I need to add some solder here to my iron. Okay, so there's our ground, or negative rather, and let's grab a hold of our other A connector. I've never soldered over the camera before. This is definitely interesting. Please don't judge me. Alright, so there we have it, guys. I got those guys knocked out. I'm just going to slide this heat shrink up against here. Let's grab our heat gun. Okay, so I'm going to give it a little blast. Make sure you're not heating up at your heat shrink box. That's a terrible idea. There we have it. I've got our first step up, I guess, of this heat shrink. And then again, as I mentioned, I'm gonna trim this back, and we're gonna add a piece of tube, or a piece of this heat shrink, to cover up the solder joint and attach it to that piece of heat shrink. So we just need about this much. Times 2. Alright guys, so I've got my 2 larger pieces of heat shrink, and as you see, quite nicely just slides right over. And what we're looking to do here is we're going to have this heat shrink butt right up against that line that we didn't want to cross with the solder. Hot. Okay, there's one down. Oh no, did I blow away my other piece of heat shrink? There it is. Okay, so now I'm going to add number 2 in, and again, keeping it just at that cross line, that line that we do not want to cross. There we have it. Now we've got both of those guys soldered and heat shrunk. Now I want to show you something why I really like these Traxxas connectors. There's a positive and a negative on that connector, and that makes these connectors so easy. I mean, it's just stamped right on the connector which one's positive and which one's negative. Now you can plug the brass tabs in the wrong way, so just make sure that when you're linking up that positive, I always start with the positive one. So there we go, so the red's in the positive. Now another really cool part about this connector is you'll notice these little, well, that heat shrink sucked back quite a bit, but there's these little ears. It's like a T. What we're going to do is connector flat down on your workbench, use a flat blade on that ear, and you'll feel a click, and now that connector is in place. So now I'm going to drop the black lead, the negative, in. We're going to do the same thing. There it is. And you can't hear it on the camera, but you'll feel and hear a click, and that's that connector going into place. So now last thing to do is add this big piece of heat shrink here, and I'm going to suck these guys in as much as possible. So that's how we're going to end up. So there we have it. Now if everything works according to my plan, we plug this guy in, and there we go. Sweet. Alright guys, we've got light. And like I was saying earlier, these little 1400, these smaller Traxxas batteries or remote control car batteries, they last forever on these lamps. So these tiny little batteries, I can get about 2 to 2.5 hours of runtime with these guys. And actually, I've got a scale right here. So, okay, so there we go. So this is the battery that I traditionally ride with, and there you go. It's less than 120 grams. So that's pretty awesome. And then actually, since we've got it, here's my helmet lamp. So this is what I would ride on my helmet. If I'm road, I just ride one of these on my handlebars. Off-road, I'll put this in my helmet and that battery in my jersey pocket. So there we are at 205. That's battery and lamp at 205 grams. Now, of course, if you're going on a crazy ride, you're heading towards 390 grams on that guy. But anyway, even if you've got 2 of these things, you're just over 200 grams, and you've got 2 of these lamps. This is the lamp that I run on my handlebars typically. So is this guy any heavier? So you're at 92. Yeah, so about the same weight. I really like this lamp. It puts out a ton of light. Of course, I just have it on my bars, but anyway, so there's my bar setup, and actually I would have one more of those batteries, so another 115 grams to that, and that's what I'm typically riding with. But I mean, that's nothing. So cool. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I've got a bunch of links in the description. If you have any questions about setting it up, just shoot me a question below. Thank you.